The second rank split of Apex Legends Season 13 is here, setting us all back 4 ranks and giving us a chance to grind the rank back on World's Edge. In addition to resetting our ranks, this new split also features some slight changes to the rank system, with cheaper entry costs and significant changes to how much RP you get from a high kill game. Stay tuned to learn how to play World's Edge in Apex Season 13 in this split's meta report. Also real quick, sorry about my voice, I still have the virus after GMAC and it has been a rough week. World's Edge houses a few interesting POIs with not only varying levels of loot and rotations, but also some special opportunities to unlock special high tier loot. Big Mod has high tier loot scattered around it, along with several bins and crafting materials. You can use these crafting materials to go into the bottom floor on Big Mod and craft yourself Rampart's special weapons. These weapons are fully kitted out with attachments in the respective variety, but also have Rampart Splatter Round, which decreases the reload time by 25%. Trials is marked separately on the map, but is considered part of the Skyhook POI since it doesn't have enough loot for an entire team. What Trials does have is a pretty high vantage point with access to guaranteed snipers and sniper attachments, as well as a Trials challenge within. The user can kill free waves of prowlers to unlock increasingly rare gear such as golden helmets, shields, backpacks, and knockdown shields. The flying drones have a chance to drop a keycard which can be used to unlock the vault in these free locations. The vault drops several high tier items, including but not limited to golden gear, and is fairly easy to pass through when rotating into the map. Both Lava Siphon and Climatizer feature 2 moving gondolas, which you can hop onto to quickly move across these POIs. These gondolas recently featured high tier loot such as high level armors, but the chance of high tier items on the gondolas themselves has been significantly reduced in Season 13. That being said, there is still loot inside of them, and the respective points of interest are still considered high tier loot. Countdown has access to guaranteed high tier armors behind a blast door in the middle of the open, and can be opened by using one of the consoles on either side. When dropping, make sure that one teammate drops on the console and the other on the middle to make sure that you get access to the armors. Speaking of special opportunities, here is a reminder to hit that like button so this video can reach more people. Perhaps even reach your randoms for your future ranked games? This iteration of World's Edge has fewer points of interest than other maps, with the loot spread out and divided by open areas, and you're usually expected to split the loot with other teams if you contest in, for example, Skyhook, which is divided from the east to the west, with the dividing point being around the large tower in the middle. Teams who contest Lava City usually find themselves on one side each, unable to push each other, with a third-party threat from both Big Mod and the Dome, and as such are expected to just loot and rotate in. If you want to get kitted up with lots of loot, including mid to high tier items, you'll want to drop in Countdown, Skyhook, Fragment West, Climatizer, Thermal Station, Lava Siphon, Lava City, Big Mod, or the Dome. Some of these POIs have good loot but are very large and spread out, and as such take a very long time to go through. Keep this in mind if you're playing for earlier rotations. POIs such as Lava Siphon, Climatizer, Thermal Station, Lava City, and sometimes Skyhook allows for edge play since you're naturally on the edge of the map, but also have time to loot up properly before rotating in late. Smaller points of interest are generally near the center of the map, with less but usually much denser placed loot, and the goal is to quickly loot up and rotate as fast as possible to get early zone and playing for late game. If this suits you, then you should look for Staging, Tree, Geyser, Fragment East, Epicenter, Survey Camp, Countdown, or Landslide, though Landslide barely has any loot to begin with. I don't recommend it. Keep in mind that some POIs are very bunched up together and aren't recommended to contest, as you are guaranteed to be third-partied from several nearby points of interest. I'll cluster these together, and you should think twice before aggroing in any of these areas. There's the Countdown cluster, the Skyhook cluster, the Lava City cluster, the Fragment cluster, and the Lava Siphon cluster. If you choose to contest, make sure that the fight is clean, or at the very least make sure that you aren't the team that's getting squeezed from several directions at once. There are also a few unmarked no-name zones in World's Edge, and all are good for setting up early game third parties when teams are contesting each other. Thermal Station can be contested from either of the cluster of houses surrounding it, as well as a cluster of houses far north of it, which is great for setting up contests against Staging or Lava Fissure. The same can be said about the no-name town between Fragment East and Overlook, which is great to contest Geyser, Overlook, or Fragment East. There's also a few houses just about north of Lava Siphon, which can be used to quickly loot up and push into Siphon, as well as a cave between Skyhook and Survey Camp, which features enough loot and a incredibly tall balloon, allowing the team to quickly loot up and fly in for the third party. When it comes to rotations, it's important to know what your goal is and where you dropped. If you're playing an edge playstyle, you can take your sweet time and make sure to loot up around you before moving in, whereas if you're playing somewhere with less loot, you'll want to quickly loot and rotate deep into the zone, usually as close to a beeline as possible. World's Edge is terrible for ambushes, and you should be careful when rotating through most chokes, but especially these chokes, as they are very easy to hide in and surprise the enemy when they are out in the open. After rotating, you'll always want to get the best position, even when you are playing edge, since World's Edge has several high value positions for most endings. It's impossible to tell you the best position for every single endgame, but you're going to want to look out for this Trials High Ground, Skyhook West Zip Buildings, House on Climatizer Hill, Climatizer Bridge, Overlook's Donut or the pillars, Northmost Rest Beacon, the high ground east of the Northmost Rest Beacon, houses west of Lava Siphon, the weapon rack houses on Countdown, the house cluster between Thermal and Fisher, Landslide's high ground, southmost side of Dome on the outside, high ground west of Geyser, the launch site / Siphon high ground house tunnel, the Harvester houses is high ground, the truck on Tree or just a little high ground or pillar south of it, the high ground south of Lava Siphon towards Tree, and of course the bridge south of Harvester. As usual with meta reports, these all have varying levels of strength and viability depending on how long the game has elapsed and depending on the ending and where the other teams are set up. But you usually want to aim to set up in that spot or around it to be safe in the mid to late game. Most of these positions turn into god spots if they're in a zone 5 to 6. Keep in mind though, this comes at a cost where teams might be more likely to push or focus you. If you want to get the most out of these rotations and positions, we'll have to take a look at the meta compositions. But first, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure that you subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. I upload all kinds of Apex content on the daily, but somehow only 30% of you guys are subscribed. What's so great about World's Edge is that it allows for several playstyle and team compositions depending on which playstyle you'd want to run. The many buildings, varying levels of high ground, and cover allows you to play passively or even defensively, but the vast open areas in some zones or rotations may need you to run a Gibraltar or Newcastle. Starting off, we have the tried and true bunker composition. The bunker composition is made for defensive and passive play with the core roster of Wraith, Caustic, and Valkyrie. You use this composition to quickly loot up in early game and then rotating deep into zone and setting up in any of the spots that you think you're going to be in the ending. Wraith is useful for scouting and making portals for late game rotations. You want the Valkyrie in order to scan the beacon and quickly rotate for the end game. Caustic can also be swapped out for a Watson, and Wraith can be swapped for, say, a Gibraltar or Seer or Crypto if you want more information, but at the trade of less viable rotations. On the flip side, we have the aggressive or so-called W key composition. Previously, we saw the Revenant Octane combination to house this composition, but because of several nerfs to these two kits, they are not as viable. Instead, the aggro compositions have the core of Gibraltar, Maggie, and Valk, with Gibraltar giving a little bit of anchoring and safe refuge in the late game, as well as aggressive bubbles, with Maggie's tactical countering team playing in their own bubbles, and of course Valkyrie for off angles and rotations. Maggie can be swapped out for Octane, Wraith, or Ashe as well. Gibraltar is generally a must-have on World's Edge, but you can get away with running two aggressive legends, for example Maggie, Ashe, and Valkyrie as well. We see some teams run a Horizon to play aggressively on World's Edge, with the benefit of getting good vertical mobility for the entire team alongside the Black Hole Ultimate, but she is definitely less viable on World's Edge than on Stormpoint, since a lot of end zones have less verticality to play around with. And somewhere in the middle, of course, we have the sustained composition that revolves around having a Loba. This is pretty close to the defensive composition, with the main exception being the Loba supplying the team and allowing you to grieve other teams out of their supplies while continuing to loot around you with the black market. The sustained comp's core composition usually looks like Wraith, Loba, and Valkyrie. You can replace the Wraith with a defensive legend as well to double up on the defensive playstyle, but then your mid-game rotations are kind of poor. Remember that the sustained comp wants to rotate early and play high grounds with poke-centric loadouts to whittle down the enemy team's supplies. As opposed to previous seasons of World's Edge, with this new split we have seen a few teams replacing Valkyrie with a Pathfinder, since the grapple allows you to quickly move between covers, and the zipline is perfect for quickly rotating deep into zone and taking some high grounds that are crucial for late games. The flip side with running a Pathfinder is that he lacks versatility and is very hard to get the most out of if you are playing from behind and rotating into zone, whereas Valkyrie is a get out of jail free card, so keep this in mind before giving him a try. Keep in mind that these are all products of theory crafting, and we still don't know how the lobbies will evolve with the new rank changes coming into the new split. If you want to hear more about the upcoming changes as well as my thoughts on them, that video is available on the screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.